So welcome NCEA Level 1 Physicists, continue on with mechanics. Today we are looking at resultant forces. Okay, so what's a resultant force? Well, if one or more than one force is acting on an object, you can actually replace those two values with a single force that has the same effect of those original forces being added. So for example here we have 3 newtons and 2 newtons pushing the object to the right. So you can combine those two forces to make a resultant force of 5 newtons. Okay, this is known as a resultant force. You can combine 2 and 3 to make 5 newtons. So in terms of motion of an object and the relationship between that and the resultant force, if the resultant force is 0, then the object's velocity stays the same, and that can also include the idea of the velocity being 0. Okay, so meaning stationary, but it can also mean it moves at a constant velocity, no acceleration. In the direction of the object that is moving, okay, so that means that the object is going to accelerate. There'll be a change in velocity over change in time. And if it's in the opposite direction, the resultant force of which the object is moving, okay, so kind of pushing back, then the object will slow down or decelerate. The change in velocity over change in time will be negative. So let's just look at a few examples of that. So the first example would be, say you're pushing a box. The box will move when the push force exerted by the man is greater than the friction force between the surface of the ground and the box. Or, for example, the plane here will accelerate if the engine force, the thrust force from the engine, is greater than the drag force from the air, and also the drag force from the friction on the ground. And final 2 examples here. So if the brakes exert a resultant force in the opposite direction that the Mini is moving, okay, forward direction, then that will cause the car to slow down, to change its velocity over change in time. It will decelerate, so it will be a negative acceleration. And the final one is for a glider here. Once released, the glider will move at constant velocity because the drag force and the thrust force pushing it forward are the same. Okay, so there's a few examples there of the relationship between the resultant force and motion.